All right, since we're in the middle of our series on certain philosophical concepts, I figured it was time to introduce some philosophical concepts that I've actually come up with over the years. Tonight, we're going to start with the plane crash effect. And I used to have the ones that I've thought up over the years in a nice, neat, organized, excuse me while I adjust my microphone here, Facebook note. So, Facebook used to have this section called notes, and it was a great way to organize more. Thought out, more, long, so a greater length, not quite articles, but, pieces that you might put together for yourself. For me, I use this in my this feature of Facebook as in my personal, life as a way to record things like, what are my favorite songs of a certain genre? That way, if I ever need to ever care to know, I can look back on that and either reflect or say, "Man, what were those songs that I really like that were in this certain playlist?" And I can look those up, say, on the road and not have to worry about, even if I have my phone on me to get access to that, or where I might have stored them on, say, a new phone that I might have just gotten. So it was a neat way to have more long form pieces, and they're phasing this feature out. So it still technically exists, but you'll never be able to find it on any of your pages. So you'll have to actually do a search within your pages for the title of those notes themselves. So as a way of basically re-archiving, backing up those concepts, I'm going to start with, like I said, the plane crash effect, which was one of the three philosophical concepts I've had in my head over the years. And what I'm going to do is pretty much just read over it, and let you know, guys. And because I think I've have it written out exactly the way I would describe that. In the case of all of these philosophical concepts, especially tonight's, the plane crash effect, I've had these in my mind for a very long time, and I've yet to hear anybody come up with an actual title for these sort of ideas, and to really describe these effects in great detail as a specific effect. So I could well be wrong, but I might have actually conceived these concepts myself. Um, I kind of don't believe that could possibly be the case. So let me know if there is an actual name for this and if there's something I should be looking up, to refer to these concepts. So tonight, like I said, we are going to start off with the plane crash effect. There has to be a name for what I'm about to describe, but this is the name I've been using, and it goes something like this. And it starts with a bit of a Q&A. Question: what's the safest way to travel per passenger mile? Answer: airplane. And basically everybody knows this. But you hear about planes crashing all the time. Hell, they happen so often I can even name some of them. Yes, you quote unquote hear about them all the time because you hear about them every single time they happen. And this is the short version of the plane crash effect. Yes, you hear about them all the time because you hear about them every single time they happen. And this is the short version, when events are extremely rare and virtually always covered by every major news outlet, the effect is to increase recall to a level that makes the anecdote appear to happen, quote unquote, all the time, because you believe you, quote unquote, hear about it all the time. There are a lot of factors to consider here, too, which can exacerbate the effect and should be considered at least indirect parts of the plane crash effect. One, local news outlets may give a horrific car crash coverage for a day, but if it's not being drilled into your skull for a week by every major media outlet across the country and further talked about in your personal circles, you tend to forget the event even happened. This makes it seem like the event doesn't happen as often because you can't as distinctly remember the event. By contrast, events that are extraordinarily rare but are covered constantly appear to not actually be rare. For example, playing in the NBA. Virtually no child who plays basketball or aspires to play basketball in the NBA will actually make it. And this is dumbed down because we wind up seeing the NBA basically every night in the winter. So it seems like it's there in front of us every day. It can't be as hard to make it into the NBA as it actually is. 2, when the denominator isn't time, but something like passenger miles, then the passage of time being short between each event will make the event seem more likely than it actually is if the number of time excuse me, if the number of times the probability has been iterated is inconceivably enormous. What does that mean? It's probably too much English for you there. So let's extrapolate what that means. In the case of a plane crash, planes travel unimaginable distances each day and carry with them a further unimaginable number of passenger miles. This means that, although you may hear about 5 or 6 plane crashes in a year, and I bet you don't, the events are, when comparing them in a meaningful manner to other forms of travel, still extraordinarily rare. In this case, the event and the numerator are deaths. This is also true in other aspects of data collection where the denominator is not time, such as comparing the likelihood of being shot by a police officer to other outcomes when dealing with police, because the appropriate denominator isn't deaths per year or month or day, but per interaction, which will reveal that death by police officer is actually extraordinarily rare, and even more so if you are unarmed, because the mere passage of time is irrelevant to the likelihood of the event occurring, which is dependent on, at the very least, actually interacting with police. So if you never interact with police, there's no possible way to die because at the hands of police officers. So the denominator, and when you're determining likelihood, has to be the event that matters, which is the actual the interaction. It is unclear if plane crashes get outsized coverage. Okay, this is part 3. It is unclear if plane crashes get outsized coverage because of the usually extreme tragedy involved. Most plane crashes result in a ball of fire in a gigantic impact zone, and in many cases involve hundreds of people dying at a time and in an instant. Or because they're so rare. So do they always get the type of coverage they get because it's such a severe tragedy, or is it because they're so rare? Or is it both, and to what a degree? That's unclear. This factor can exacerbate the plane crash effect because it is reinforced through a cycle of feedback loops. The event is rare, so it will get more coverage, which makes it seem less rare, but it actually is extremely rare, so it will get more coverage. I would consider this feedback loop the second half of the plane crash effect. So I think this actually does a pretty good job of explaining it. I'm actually going to link to this post in this video's description because I don't know how else you guys are going to find this in a written format. But basically, I'm pretty sure I've made clear the point here. Death by plane crash is actually extraordinarily rare. And when you compare it to other modes of travel, in terms of the per passenger mile, because what you care about when you travel is the per passenger mile traveled, it's actually incredibly safe. So when you're talking about death by car, it's significantly worse than both trains and planes. And I don't know where bicycle stacks up. And the reason bicycles might stack up worse than cars is because most people don't travel very far on a bicycle. So the denominator is actually lower. And the reason that the passenger mile has to be in the denominator, again, is that's the thing that predicts the outcome. If you never get into a plane, the likelihood of you actually, if you never travel by plane, the likelihood of you dying by virtue of a plane crash is 0 because it's impossible to do. So the thing that is predicting it, in this case, the independent variable you need to control for is the passenger mile because it's the travel that causes the plane to crash. Again, if you get onto a plane and the plane doesn't travel, it's not going to crash. Something could crash into it, but that's a totally unrelated topic. And I can't really get into the philosophy in this video of exactly why that's totally unrelated if you can't tell why that's totally unrelated. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you think that there already is a name for this effect. And I hope you have enjoyed this presentation of my concept, which is the plane crash effect. Night, everybody.